In the name of our loving and ever-present God. Amen.
Amen.
So what are you arguing about? I need to tell you, we're not talking here. We're not talking here about, what end of the toothpaste tube to squeeze. We're not talking here about whether or not we should have chicken or beef for our dinner. We're not talking about that kind of an argument, are we? What are you arguing about? What are we arguing about? We're arguing about what to do about fundamentalism. The kind of fundamentalism that exists and will cut off people's heads in some far distant place. We're talking about the kind of fundamentalism that will create armies and paramilitaries that show up in the forest of Michigan. We're talking about when life begins. We're talking about, these are not little arguments, are they? We're talking about how we treat people that come across our borders. We talk about how we deal with persons who have a different social construct from us. We're talking about the visible and the invisible in this world. We're talking about, and we're arguing about these things, aren't we? You know what we're arguing about. We're arguing about whether or not we actually put boots on the ground. And one of the arguments says, yes, we should do that. And another argument said, well, if that's what you want to do and you want our kids to do it, then vote for 14 other people. We have that kind of thing in our discourse. And we look back and this argument is not as innocuous as it may seem, does it? Is it? It's not a simple argument, because who is the first among the disciples? Who is that, and what does that mean? If you want to know what that means, think about it. Let's scroll ahead in history to 325, after Constantine is alive and died, and the church became an established religion, and then all of a sudden, the closer you were to the relic, or the closer you were to the power structure, the closer you were to that, the more power you had. Think about not so much even the papacy, but think about the people that are around the Pope. Think about all of that. First and shall be last. And I'm going to remind you of something you already know. That when Jesus pulls this child out of this group and brings him forward, the understanding of this is different 2,000 years ago than it is today. It's a completely different understanding, because, you see, children in that day were invisible. They were completely without power. So much so that, you probably know this, that oftentimes when leaders in the Roman world, leaders among the aristocracy of Rome, when they were childless, they wouldn't adopt a child. They would adopt an adult. Children were invisible. They didn't exist in the eyes of the community. And things haven't changed a lot, except we don't call them children anymore. I mean, you think about, for instance, just think about this. Once in a while, and I confess that it's not nearly often enough, if I'm driving through Grand Rapids or through Lansing or through Charleston, South Carolina, wherever I am, and I stop at a light, oftentimes someone will go across the street in front of me And I will go, we don't all start at the same starting line, do we? I will say that to myself. There are some folks that are away yonder ahead of others in their starting place in life. And the challenge, of course, is the visibility or invisibility of those persons in our lives. Who is first and who is last? This gospel section is written, Jesus is on his way to fulfill his destiny in Jerusalem. Jesus is on his way to fulfill his destiny in Jerusalem. And relatively before this event, it's the Transfiguration in the Gospel of Mark, in which the Gospel writer Mark says, you really need to be paying attention to this person, Jesus Christ. You really need to be paying attention to Jesus. Even the term Messiah, which Peter uses in Scripture, who do they say that I am? Well, they think you're, a prophet. Well, who do you say that I am? Well, you're the Messiah. Okay, well, what does that mean in the 2,000 years ago context in the world of Mark? What does it mean? It's different from what we understand it to mean, I think. Messiah meant different things to different folks. It still means different things to different folks. It still does. In those days, that person could be a king. That person could be a great prophet. That person could be a high priest of some kind. But the idea was that the Messiah was going to have a special influence on the world and was going to change the world so that the visible becomes visible. The invisible becomes visible. The difference between the scripture or the theology as espoused by Jesus Christ and the theology before Jesus Christ is actually summed up. Is actually summed up in this little reading from the prophet Micah, believe it or not. It's summed up in that. Because in the prior days, sacrifice was necessary for the restoration of a relationship with God. If you sinned, you needed to do some kind of a sacrifice. And this implication here, the person who is speaking to the prophet Micah is asking, do I need to sacrifice my firstborn child? And that's a real question. It's not a subjunctive, it's the real thing. Do I need to sacrifice my firstborn child? Do I need to bring all the fruits that I gather first of all in my garden? Do I need to... And the prophet Micah says, no, all you need to do is this. You need to do justice, to love kindness, and to walk humbly with your God. And the revelation, most of the time when I think of revelation, I think of things I don't understand. There have been a few times in my life when I've been under... I'm not going to say the influence of anything, but you can draw your own conclusions when I'm having some pretty weird dreams, let's just say that. And I think sometimes revelation is a reflection of that. But in this instance, revelation is talking about something new, the creation of something new, a new world, a new order. Here we are, my brothers and sisters. This is right at the beginning of my 8th year with you. We're going to go out and we're going to celebrate in a little while with some wonderful food that I've already seen cooking. We're going to join together with that. We're going to remind ourselves that in this world in which we share, in which there are visible, in which there are invisible, in which we are arguing about things that matter and things that don't. When we are trying to determine how it is we live out our lives in the presence of a living God that we see in this person Jesus. As we move together, one of the things that I want us to remember that we must bind ourselves together even more as a community. We must bind ourselves even more as a community than we did before. We need to understand. We need to understand that just as Jesus is heading to his destiny, and his destiny involves suffering, our destiny involves suffering. Our our destiny involves that. And as we move into this world, as each of us approach the visible and invisible, as each of us approach our destiny, more and more we are going to be in need of each other. We are going to need each other and see each other. And we should simplify as much as we can. Do justice, love mercy, walk humbly before your God. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Love God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself. And don't forget yourself. As we walk forward together, my brothers and sisters, into this new, let's call it, season, as we head toward our future together, for how long that is, however long that is, let us remember that it really isn't about who is in power. It's not about who has the power and the strings of power. It is about your power. It is about what is inside of you, and how you acknowledge that, and what it is you see, and where are your values. And those things must be questioned from time to time. You must ask yourself, you must argue with yourself about what matters to you. And who matters to you. You matter to me, and I think I matter to you. And that's precious. It's precious, my brothers and sisters. As we move through this service, glance to the left and to the right and consider forward and behind you, and realize how precious that is too. Who shall be first and who shall be last?